We live in a world that treats being alone like a problem to be solved, as if solitude is a waiting room, not a destination, as if the ultimate proof of a meaningful life is being chosen by someone else. And quietly, subtly, we absorb the message that if we are alone, something must be missing. We are taught, often without words, that being alone means something went wrong. That solitude is a gap waiting to be filled, a silence that signals rejection or failure. From an early age, we absorb the idea that connection only counts if it is romantic, constant, and visible. So when we find ourselves alone, we don't just feel the quiet, we question our worth. But solitude is not the absence of love or belonging. It is a conscious choice to stand in our own presence without apology. Choosing solitude requires courage because it goes against the current. It means resisting the pressure to rush into relationships just to feel acceptable or complete. It means trusting that your life does not need an audience to be valid. In solitude, there is no one to distract you from your thoughts, no one to soften uncomfortable truths. What you gain instead is clarity. You begin to hear your own voice again, the one that gets drowned out by expectations, compromises, and the need to be understood. Solitude creates space for honesty. When you are alone, there is no performance, no emotional negotiation, no shrinking to keep harmony. You wake up to your own rhythms. You notice what brings you peace and what drains you. You recognize patterns you once ignored because they were easier to overlook in the presence of someone else. This kind of awareness is not always gentle, but it is grounding. It teaches you how to belong to yourself first. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude, though the world often confuses the two. Loneliness is feeling unseen even when surrounded by people. Solitude is being alone and still feeling intact. When solitude is chosen, it becomes restorative rather than punishing. It offers rest from explaining yourself. It allows you to rebuild trust with your instincts, your boundaries, and your needs. Seeing solitude as a decision shifts the narrative. It moves you out of scarcity and into intention. You are no longer waiting to be picked or rescued. You are actively choosing depth over distraction, truth over comfort. And from that place, something powerful happens. You stop tolerating connections that cost you your peace. Solitude does not close you off from love, it prepares you for it. When you know how to be alone without abandoning yourself, relationships become a complement, not a cure. You enter them whole, not hoping to be fixed. And that is the quiet strength of choosing solitude, not because you have to, but because you trust yourself enough to stay. Living alone strips life down to its essentials. There is no one else to absorb your moods, anticipate your needs, or steady you when emotions rise. And at first, that can feel unsettling. We're so used to leaning on others for reassurance, distraction, or grounding that being alone with our feelings can feel like standing without a railing. But over time, something shifts. You begin to realize that the support you've been seeking externally can be cultivated internally. Emotional self-reliance doesn't mean shutting people out or pretending you don't need connection. It means learning how to stay present with your own emotions instead of immediately handing them off to someone else. When you live alone, there is no automatic comfort. If you're anxious, you learn how to calm yourself. If you're sad, you learn how to sit with it without rushing to be rescued. If you're overwhelmed, you discover what actually soothes you rather than what merely distracts you. Living alone teaches you responsibility for your inner world. There's no one to blame for your mood, no one to regulate it for you. You become aware of your emotional patterns, what triggers you, what drains you, what restores you. You start to notice how you talk to yourself when no one is around to soften the edges. That awareness is powerful. It allows you to replace self-criticism with self-compassion, not because someone asked you to, but because you need it to function. This kind of self-reliance builds confidence quietly. You learn that difficult days don't destroy you. You learn that you can survive discomfort without numbing it or escaping it. Each time you navigate a hard moment alone, you prove to yourself that you are capable. That proof accumulates. It becomes a deep, steady trust that doesn't disappear when circumstances change. Living alone also recalibrates how you show up in relationships. When you no longer depend on someone else to regulate your emotions, you stop demanding that others fix what they didn't break. You communicate more clearly. You ask for support without desperation. You offer connection without losing yourself in it. Emotional self-reliance doesn't harden you, it steadies you. It allows you to experience closeness without clinging and distance without panic. Living alone gives you the space to build that steadiness from the inside out. And once you have it, you carry it with you into friendships, into love, into every room you enter, knowing you can meet yourself there first. Relationships are often presented as mirrors, places where we discover who we are through connection. And while that can be true, there is another side we rarely talk about: how easily relationships become places where we hide. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but subtly. We stay busy caring, accommodating, explaining, adjusting. We focus so much on managing the relationship that we stop paying attention to ourselves. Distraction doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like comfort. It looks like routine conversations that never go deep, shared habits that feel safe, and emotional agreements that keep things running smoothly. Over time, we can mistake this comfort for growth. But comfort can also be a way of avoiding the harder work: listening to our dissatisfaction, naming our unmet needs, or admitting that parts of us have gone quiet. In many relationships, especially ones we enter before knowing ourselves well, we learn how to adapt faster than we learn how to be honest. We adjust our tone, our preferences, our desires, until the relationship feels easier to maintain. And in that ease, we slowly disconnect from our own inner signals. The question shifts from "what do I need?" to "what will keep this from falling apart?" That shift may keep the relationship intact, but it often costs us clarity. Relationships can also distract us by absorbing emotional energy we haven't learned to hold ourselves. Instead of sitting with grief, uncertainty, or fear, we talk it through endlessly, hoping for resolution through agreement or reassurance. And while sharing matters, there's a difference between connection and outsourcing self-awareness. When someone else becomes the primary container for our emotions, we stop developing our own capacity to understand and regulate them. Being alone removes these distractions. Without someone else to negotiate with, there is no hiding place. Your discomfort has your full attention. Your desires become clearer because they are no longer filtered through compromise. The questions you've been postponing, about purpose, boundaries, fulfillment, begin to surface. This can feel confronting, but it is also deeply honest. This doesn't mean relationships are inherently harmful. It means they require consciousness. When we use relationships to avoid ourselves, we lose more than we gain. But when we step away long enough to reconnect with our inner world, we return differently. We bring awareness instead of avoidance, presence instead of performance. The truth is, the most meaningful relationships are not the ones that distract us from who we are, but the ones that can meet us after we've remembered. Boundaries are often talked about as something we declare to other people, but in truth, they are something we practice with ourselves first. Independence creates the conditions for that practice. When you live on your own, there is no one to automatically interrupt your limits or rescue you from the consequences of ignoring them. Your energy, time, and emotional space become unmistakably yours, and how you treat them matters immediately. Independence teaches boundaries through lived experience, not theory. If you overextend yourself, you feel it. If you ignore your need for rest, your body responds. If you say yes when you mean no, there is no one else to absorb the fallout. This feedback is honest and direct. It teaches you where your limits actually are, not where you wish they were. And that clarity is the foundation of real boundaries. When you are independent, you begin to recognize the difference between what drains you and what sustains you. You learn how much social interaction you need, how much solitude restores you, and how quickly resentment builds when you abandon yourself. These lessons are subtle but powerful. They shape how you structure your days, how you protect your time, and how you decide who gets access to your inner world. Independence also removes the pressure to constantly negotiate your needs. In relationships, boundaries are often softened to preserve harmony. Alone, you don't have to justify your preferences or explain your capacity. You can simply honor it. That practice builds self-trust. You stop questioning whether your needs are too much and start recognizing them as information. This self-trust changes how you relate to others. When you know your limits, you don't wait until you're overwhelmed to speak up. You don't set boundaries from anger or exhaustion. You set them calmly, clearly, and early. Independence teaches you that boundaries are not punishments or walls, they are structures that make connection possible without self-erasure. Perhaps most importantly, independence shows you that boundaries are an act of care. They protect your well-being, but they also protect your relationships from resentment and burnout. When you've learned to respect your own limits in solitude, you stop asking others to guess them. You show up more honest, more grounded, and more generous. Boundaries learned through independence don't disappear when connection returns. They come with you. And because they were built in self-respect rather than fear, they are strong enough to hold both closeness and freedom at the same time. Loneliness is often treated like a diagnosis, a final statement about our worth or our lives. If you feel lonely, the story goes, something is wrong. You've fallen behind. You've been left out. So we rush to silence it, through noise, through busyness, through relationships that fill time but not truth. But loneliness is not a verdict. It is information. And when we stop fighting it, it becomes a teacher. Loneliness shows up when something within us wants attention. It might be a need for deeper connection, more meaning, or greater honesty with ourselves. Instead of judging the feeling, living alone invites us to listen. When there is no one to distract us from the quiet, loneliness speaks clearly. It points to where we've been settling, where we've been avoiding, and where we're longing for more. When loneliness is met with curiosity rather than shame, it changes shape. It becomes less about being unwanted and more about being awake. You begin to notice the difference between being alone and being disconnected from yourself, from your values, from your sense of purpose. That awareness is powerful. It helps you stop chasing proximity and start seeking alignment. Loneliness also teaches discernment. It clarifies which connections nourish you and which merely fill space. When you've sat with loneliness long enough to understand it, you stop fearing it. And when you stop fearing it, you stop tolerating relationships that cost you your self-respect. You choose depth over availability, presence over convenience. There is resilience built in this process. Each time you survive loneliness without numbing it or escaping it, you learn that the feeling is temporary, but the insight lasts. You learn that discomfort doesn't require immediate relief, it requires attention. That lesson strengthens your emotional capacity and deepens your self-trust. Living alone allows loneliness to do its work without interruption. It gives you the space to ask hard questions. What am I actually missing? What am I avoiding? What kind of connection am I truly craving? The answers that emerge are rarely about quantity. They're about authenticity. When loneliness becomes a teacher, it no longer defines you. It guides you. It leads you toward friendships that feel reciprocal, toward love that feels steady, and toward a relationship with yourself that feels honest. And from that place, loneliness loses its power, not because it disappears, but because it has been understood. Freedom changes the way we love. When you've learned how to stand on your own, emotionally, mentally, and practically, you no longer approach relationships as lifelines. You approach them as invitations. That shift makes all the difference. Freedom removes the urgency that often clouds our choices and replaces it with intention. You're no longer asking someone to fill a gap. You're asking whether they fit into a life that already feels whole. When freedom comes first, relationships stop being about survival. There's no rush to secure commitment just to feel safe, no pressure to merge before understanding who you are together. You can move slowly. You can observe. You can choose based on alignment rather than fear. And because you're not desperate for connection, you're more honest about what you want and what you can offer. Freedom also changes how conflict is handled. When you know you can stand on your own, disagreement doesn't feel like abandonment. You don't shrink to keep peace or escalate to protect yourself. You can stay present in discomfort because your sense of security isn't dependent on being agreed with or chosen in every moment. That steadiness creates space for real communication, clear, respectful, and grounded. Healthy relationships require two people who can self-regulate. Freedom builds that capacity. It teaches you how to manage your emotions, how to meet your own needs, and how to ask for support without expectation or entitlement. This balance allows intimacy to deepen without becoming consuming. Love becomes something you share, not something you rely on to hold you together. Perhaps most importantly, freedom refines your standards. When you're not afraid of being alone, you stop tolerating behavior that erodes your self-worth. You don't confuse intensity with intimacy or attachment with love. You recognize red flags without explaining them away. You choose partners who respect your boundaries because you respect them yourself. Freedom doesn't make you closed off. It makes you selective. It allows you to enter relationships with open hands instead of clenched ones. You're able to offer commitment without losing autonomy and closeness without self-erasure. In the end, the healthiest relationships are formed not from fear of loneliness, but from confidence in self. Freedom creates that confidence. And when two people meet from that place, connection becomes lighter, stronger, and far more sustainable, because it is chosen, not needed.